When I bought my house in Maplewood Heights, one of the things I loved most was the private pool in the backyard. It wasn't massive, not one of those hotel-style setups, but it was mine. A perfect oval of blue water, a clean concrete deck, and enough space to host my family for summer barbecues. The realtor had smiled when I first saw it. Best part? She'd said. No community pool drama. No HOA rules about guest limits. Your pool, your rules, that line stuck with me. My pool, my rules. The first summer was perfect. I hosted quiet parties, invited my nephews over for swim days, and lounged in peace. I'd wave to neighbors from behind the fence, some of them glancing enviously but smiling politely. Then fall came and I covered the pool until the next year. The problem started in May of the following year. I was out back skimming leaves when I heard someone call from the other side of the fence. "Excuse me," I turned. A woman I recognized from the neighborhood, short blonde hair, sunglasses on her head like a crown, was standing there with her hands on her hips. I had seen her before at HOA meetings, usually complaining about weeds or barking dogs. Her name was Carol, but everyone called her Karen behind her back. "Yes?" I said. "Hi. So the community pool is closed for renovations, and we were thinking..." She gestured behind her, where two kids were waiting in swimsuits.
"Would you mind if we used your pool for a little while?"
"Just a few hours, we can pitch in for chemicals or whatever." I blinked. "I'm sorry, but no. This is a private pool. It's not for neighborhood use." Her smile didn't falter, but her tone got sharper. "We're all neighbors here. You can't just keep it to yourself when people need it." "I can," I said evenly. "And I will. I'm sure the renovations will be done soon," she frowned. "You're not being very community-minded." I bit back a retort and simply said, "Goodbye," before walking back inside. I thought that was the end of it. But the next morning I found a note taped to my front door. "Dear neighbor, as you know, our HOA community pool is currently closed, and many of us have children who need a safe place to swim. We are asking that you open your private pool to neighborhood residents during this time. It is the right thing to do." The letter wasn't signed, but I knew exactly who had written it. I crumpled it up and tossed it. 2 days later, I caught Karen and two other women peeking over my fence while I was in the pool. They didn't even look embarrassed when I saw them, just asked again if I'd let their kids in. "No," I said, more firmly this time. "Stop asking. This is private property." That's when Karen crossed her arms and said, "Fine, we'll see what the HOA says about that." I laughed. "The HOA doesn't own my pool." "Go ahead," but she wasn't bluffing. That night I got an email from the HOA president requesting I consider cooperating with neighbors during the pool closure. I replied politely but firmly that my pool was not a community amenity. That should have been the end of it. Instead, 2 days later, I was sitting on my patio when I heard sirens. A police cruiser pulled up out front and an officer came to my door. "Afternoon," he said politely. "We got a report of someone denying access to a neighborhood pool in violation of HOA guidelines." I stared at him. "This is my private pool." "There are no guidelines." He glanced at my fence, then at his notepad. "Do you have proof of ownership?" I went inside and grabbed my property deed. The officer looked it over, nodded, and then sighed. "You're in the clear. This is civil, not criminal. Just know that your HOA seems pretty upset about this." When he left, I was livid. Karen had actually called the police because I wouldn't let her kids swim in my pool. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring out at the calm blue water under the porch light. Something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about the pool anymore. This was about control. About someone deciding that what was mine should belong to everyone just because she wanted it. So I started planning. I went through my HOA bylaws page by page. I found something interesting. A clause that said residents could host private events on their property, but any event open to more than 15 people required HOA notification. Nothing said I couldn't host events for paying guests, as long as they weren't official business operations. The idea clicked. In my head, like a lock turning, I called a few. Friends who lived outside the neighborhood. Parents with kids who didn't have pools. "How would you feel about a summer pool pass?" I asked. $10 a visit, unlimited drinks and snacks. They jumped at the idea. By the first weekend in June, I had a dozen guests in my backyard, music playing, kids splashing, grills smoking. It looked like a resort. I made sure to post photos online, not braggy ones, just casual shots of people having fun. It didn't take long for Karen to notice. On the third weekend, she stormed up to my fence and shouted over the music. What is this? You can't run a business out of your house? I smiled sweetly. I'm not running a business. These are my guests. Private event. Perfectly allowed. Her face turned bright red. I'm reporting you. Go ahead, I said. That night, I knew she'd email the HOA, and I knew what they'd try next. What she didn't know was that I was ready. And what I had waiting for her would make her wish she'd never picked this fight. The HOA president emailed me the next morning, his message full of stiff, legal-sounding language about unapproved commercial activity and zoning violations. I printed it out and tacked it to my refrigerator, just to remind myself what I was dealing with. Then I called my lawyer. I'm not running a business, I explained. This is a private pool party. They're my friends. I just happen to invite them every weekend. My lawyer chuckled. You're in the clear, as long as they're truly guests and not signed up like a membership club. You don't need HOA permission for that. I felt reassured, and more than a little emboldened. The next weekend, I hosted an even bigger event. Not just a barbecue this time, but a proper pool bash. Big speakers, colorful string lights, a rented margarita machine, and about 20 people laughing and splashing around. I made sure everyone was respectful. No parking in front of other people's houses. No loud music after dark. But it was a party, and it was lively. Halfway through the evening, I saw Karen standing at the end of my driveway with her phone out, filming everything like some kind of self-appointed policewoman. I waved cheerfully and went back to flipping burgers. On Monday, the HOA board sent me a formal notice of violation. I laughed out loud when I opened it. You are hereby directed to cease all commercial use of your property, including unapproved pool rental operations. I wrote back, politely explaining that there was no business operation, no advertising, no membership fees, no official schedule. Just me and my guests enjoying my property. 2 days later, I got a second letter. This one was nastier, threatening fines if I continued. I knew where this was going. I'd seen stories online of HOAs escalating until they either got their way or got sued. And I was prepared for the latter, but I decided to go one better. I started documenting everything. Every party, every letter, every interaction with Karen. I installed a camera facing the pool deck, another at the fence line. I even caught her one morning peeking through a gap in my gate with a pair of binoculars. When I confronted her about it later at the mailbox, she didn't even deny it. Someone has to make sure you're not violating community standards, she sniffed. By trespassing? I asked, raising my phone to show her the video I'd taken. Her expression faltered. That's not trespassing. It is, I said. And if you step foot on my property without permission, I will press charges, she stormed off, muttering under her breath. The following weekend, I hosted my biggest party yet, a 4th of July bash. I invited friends, coworkers, even a couple of my cousins from out of state. I had a caterer bring trays of food, rented a bounce house for the kids, and set up a fire pit for after dark. It was a perfect summer day. Around 6 p.m., the cops showed up again. Noise complaint, the officer said. Your neighbor claims you're disturbing the peace. I turned the music down immediately and invited him into the yard. See? It's a family barbecue. Kids, food, daylight hours. The officer nodded, clearly unimpressed with the complaint. You're fine as long as you keep it reasonable. As he left, Karen glared from across the street. That was the moment I decided I was done just defending myself. If they wanted to escalate, I was going to escalate too. I dug deeper into the HOA bylaws and city ordinances. I discovered something fascinating. While the HOA had the right to issue fines, those fines weren't enforceable unless they went through small claims court. And I had the right to dispute them publicly at the next board meeting. So I waited. By late July, the HOA had stacked up 3 separate violation notices against me, each with an escalating fine. The total they claimed I owed was nearly $2,000. I showed up at the monthly HOA meeting with a folder full of evidence, photos, videos, legal citations, and signed up to speak during open forum. When they called my name, I stood up in front of the packed room, smiled politely and said, Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to address the repeated harassment I've received from one of our board members and her friends. You could hear a pin drop. I laid it all out. The letters, the police visits, the video of Karen peeking through my fence, the noise complaints that had no merit, and I quoted directly from the bylaws that said nothing. Prohibited me from having as many guests as I wanted on my private property as long as I wasn't selling tickets or advertising publicly. Karen tried to interrupt twice, but the board president told her to sit down until I was finished. When I was done, I handed the president copies of my evidence and said, I am formally disputing these fines and asking that this board cease further action against me. If you continue, I will file a harassment complaint with the city and pursue my legal options, the room murmured. A few neighbors even clapped. Karen looked like she wanted to explode. After some awkward discussion, the board voted to rescind the fines pending legal review. I walked out of that meeting feeling like I'd won a battle, but I knew the war wasn't over. The next day, I got a letter in the mail. Not from the HOA, but from Karen herself. It was handwritten, scrawled in angry block letters, "You think you're clever. This isn't over." I laughed, and then I started plotting my next move, because if Karen wanted to play dirty, I had just the thing waiting for her, something that would make her wish she'd never brought the HOA into this at all. I stared at Karen's angry letter for a long time before slipping it into my growing evidence folder. It was almost funny at this point. She had turned my backyard pool into some kind of holy war, but I wasn't laughing for long. The following week, a white pickup with a city seal on the door pulled up outside my house. A man with a clipboard stepped out and walked straight to my door. "City code enforcement," he said when I opened it. "We got an anonymous tip about unpermitted construction in your backyard." I almost burst out laughing. "There's nothing under construction back there. Come see for yourself." He followed me through the side gate and looked around. The pool was clean, the deck spotless, the landscaping neatly trimmed. He jotted something on his clipboard and shook his head. "No violations here," he said. "Sorry for the trouble, but it wasn't sorry from me." It was confirmation. Karen had tried to sick the city on me. That night I sat in my office, staring at my laptop, and decided enough was enough. This wasn't just harassment, it was a pattern. And if she wanted to keep escalating, I was going to make sure she regretted every second of it. My plan came together slowly, but beautifully. First, I upgraded my security system. New cameras with higher resolution, motion alerts sent straight to my phone, and a loud siren feature I could activate remotely if anyone trespassed. Then I called my lawyer again. "What would it take?" I asked. "To get a restraining order if a neighbor keeps harassing me?" "Document everything," he said. "Which you've been doing. Get one more clear incident and you probably have a case." Perfect. The next weekend I planned my most outrageous party yet, a themed luau. I bought tiki torches, rented a couple of those giant inflatable pool floats shaped like flamingos, and even hired a local musician to play live guitar for a few hours. My guests showed up in Hawaiian shirts and flower leis. Kids splashed, parents lounged, music floated through the air. It was the happiest I'd felt all summer. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Karen was creeping along my side fence again, phone in hand, recording video through the slats. I grabbed my own phone, hit the siren button on my security app, and the yard filled with the sound of a deafening alarm. Karen yelped and stumbled back onto the sidewalk. I caught the whole thing on camera. Her face. Her phone, the exact timestamp. Then, just to twist the knife, I walked out front and waved at her. "You're trespassing," I called. "Next time I'll have the police write you up for stalking." She didn't answer, just stomped away toward her house. 2 days later, I filed for a restraining order. At the hearing, I presented everything. The letters, the videos, the police reports, even the city inspector's visit. The judge raised an eyebrow at the footage of Karen peeking through my fence. "This is a clear pattern of harassment," he said. "Order granted. She's not to approach you or your property for 12 months. I walked out of that courtroom grinning, but I wasn't finished yet. I had something else waiting. The final move. See, while I'd been dealing with Karen's antics, I'd also been quietly working on something big, a partnership with a local swim instructor. She needed a place to host private swim lessons for kids, and my pool was perfect. We drew up a contract, not a rental agreement, not a business partnership, but a private hosting arrangement. The parents paid her directly. She carried her own insurance, and I simply let her use my backyard. The first lesson took place a week after the court hearing. 6 little kids lined up with kickboards, their parents sitting in lawn chairs sipping iced tea. It was wholesome, organized, quiet, and completely within my rights. Karen couldn't do a thing about it. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Parents who had once sided with her started asking me if their kids could join. Soon we had a waiting list. That's when I went one step further. I printed a flyer and put it on the HOA bulletin board. Private swim lessons, hosted at my address. Exclusive to residents and friends. Contact for schedule. Within a week, nearly half the neighborhood had signed up. I knew it drove Karen crazy. I'd see her standing at the end of her driveway during lesson times, arms crossed, glaring. She couldn't come near. The restraining order saw to that. But she was forced to watch as I turned my backyard into the very thing she'd been demanding all along. Except it wasn't hers. It was mine. By August, my pool had become the heart of the neighborhood. Parents brought snacks to share. Kids played happily. Even the HOA president eventually came by to thank me for bringing the community together. I smiled politely and said nothing about the months of threats and fines. I saved my final card for September. When the next HOA election rolled around, I submitted my name for a board seat. I ran on a platform of transparency and fairness, promising to revise outdated rules and curb abuse of power. Karen didn't stand a chance, not with her reputation shredded by the restraining order and half the neighborhood singing my praises. The night I was elected, I sat by my pool with a drink in hand, watching the underwater lights glow. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was the guy who turned the HOA's favorite weapon into their biggest liability, and Karen still had no idea what was coming next, because I hadn't even used my trump card. Yet, the one thing I knew would end her reign of terror for good. My trump card had been waiting since July. See, that little security upgrade I'd installed didn't just record video. It also captured audio. Every time Karen came near my property, I had crystal clear clips of her ranting, threatening, and even swearing about me under her breath. At first, I just kept them for legal backup. But when the HOA announced that Karen had decided to run for re-election despite her restraining order, I knew it was time to use them. The September meeting was packed. People stood in the back, curious to see if the board would actually allow her to run again. She strutted to the front, hair perfect, smug smile plastered on her face. "I just want to say," she began, "that this community deserves leaders who care about everyone, not just themselves." That was my cue. I stood up slowly, folder in hand, and asked to be recognized. The president nodded, and I walked to the microphone. "I agree," I said, "which is why this community deserves to know the truth about what's been going on for the last 4 months." The room fell silent. I laid out the timeline. The letters she'd left at my house. The false police calls. The bogus code enforcement complaint. The videos of her peering through my fence and lurking near my gate at night. And then I played the audio. Her voice filled the room, nasty and unfiltered. "Maybe if I make his life miserable, he'll leave. Nobody should have a pool when the rest of us don't. This isn't over. I don't care if I have to get him fined into bankruptcy. I'll make sure he regrets ever moving here." Every head in the room turned to look at her. She was pale as a ghost, mouth opening and closing like a fish. I finished with the court order, proof that a judge had already agreed her behavior was harassment. "Is this," I asked, "holding the papers high, the kind of person we want representing this neighborhood?" Someone in the back started clapping, then another. Within seconds, the whole room was applauding. The HOA president cleared his throat awkwardly. "Given these revelations," he said, "the board will be voting to disqualify Ms. Karen's candidacy effective immediately." Karen sputtered, tried to argue, but no one was listening. The vote was unanimous. When I left the meeting that night, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but I wasn't done yet. 2 weeks later, the board approved my proposal to update the HOA bylaws. One new clause, written in clear language, prohibited harassment, intimidation, or retaliatory complaints between neighbors and with fines and board removal for violators. The vote passed with overwhelming support. Karen was officially barred from serving on the board for the next 3 years. By October, she had put her house up for sale. The last time I saw her, she was standing in her driveway, scowling at me as movers loaded boxes. I gave her a friendly wave. She turned away without a word. The day she left, I hosted the biggest pool party of the year. an end-of-summer bash that felt more like a victory parade. The new HOA president came by with his wife and even helped me grill burgers. "Funny thing," he said with a smile. "When Karen first complained about you, we thought you were being difficult. Turns out you were doing exactly what this neighborhood needed, standing up for yourself." I raised my glass. "Just glad it's over." By November, the pool was closed for the season, but every time I looked out at it, I smiled, because it wasn't just a pool anymore. It was a symbol of standing your ground, of not letting petty tyrants run your life. The following spring, the swim instructor and I expanded our lessons program. The HOA even promoted it in the community newsletter as a wonderful amenity offered by a generous neighbor, Generous. That made me laugh, because generosity wasn't what this had been about at all. It had been about choice. My choice to say no, and when Karen had tried to take that choice away, I'd shown her, and everyone else, that I wasn't someone they could push around. One warm evening in June, I sat out by the pool with the lights glowing under the water, drink in hand, the sound of kids laughing faintly drifting from the next house over. I thought about all the battles, the letters, the hearings, the meetings. And I thought about the look on Karen's face when her own words had played back in front of the entire neighborhood. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not revenge. Exactly. Just justice. And I'd gotten it. The war was over. The pool and my peace were finally mine.